First, though, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor now back home in Canada after more than 1,000 days in Chinese custody. They were in the air. At the same time, Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou was freed from house arrest and herself on a flight back to China. The White House today was adamant that the legal resolution of Meng's case was, they say, independent of politics.
He raised the two individuals, the two Michaels, who have been released. Very positive news. It should not come as a surprise that President Xi raised the Huawei official. But again, there was no negotiation on this call. These two leaders raised the cases of these individuals, but there was no negotiation about it. It was President Biden raising and pressing again for the release of these two Michaels, as is something that happens in every engagement we do with the Chinese, or had up to this point in time.
But what signal does China take away from all this, and likewise Canada and its allies? John Bolton previously served as the national security advisor to President Donald Trump when Meng was arrested and when China detained Kovrig and Spavor. He also previously served as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, and he's in Washington. Ambassador Bolton, thank you very much for your time today. I want to begin by asking you about a prisoner swap, something that you said should not happen when it comes to the two Michaels. Now that we see this crossing of people in the air, what would you call what just happened?
Well, I think it was a hostage swap. Obviously, we don't know the behind-the-scenes details yet, but the deferred prosecution agreement that the U.S. Department of Justice entered into with Meng Wanzhou was a concession that didn't need to be made. I think that extradition was highly likely, and I think had there been a trial on the merits, Meng would have been convicted of all the counts against her. So to give up in a circumstance like that suggests to me that there were other considerations involved than strictly the legal considerations. That's constitutionally permissible. The president has control over foreign policy, as he does over his obligation under the Constitution to take care that the laws be faithfully executed.
There's a question about whether he can and whether he should. Do you think
exactly.
if that's what happened?
And I think it was a very ill-advised decision. I think the whole world thinks there was a hostage swap here. And I think that's bad for the United States and bad for Canada.
The two people it might not be bad for, of course, are the two Michaels who actually got home. Why do you think that this was the...
Sure, that's understandable. People always feel for the hostages, and they should. And we should be bending every effort to get them back, because their seizure by the Chinese authorities was completely unwarranted. It was a totally lawless act. But remember, the reason why the U.S. and other countries have a policy against negotiating with hostage takers is that once you start in the bazaar, the only question is how high the price is going to go. Mm-hmm. So getting this or that hostage back is good for them, but bad for everybody else who's a potential hostage.
You were the national security advisor when Meng was arrested, when the whole extradition process began. When you look back, was it obvious what was going to happen to you, or what was going to happen to them? Obvious to you what would happen to them?
No, I think we were all surprised when China's immediate reaction, I mean, within a matter of days, was to take two Canadian citizens and put them in jail and come up with illusory charges that eventually went to trial, I think, for one, although perhaps not for the other. It's barbaric. And it should have sent a signal around the world about how China behaves. And to send us the further signal is, if this is the way they behave now, how will they behave when their power and influence globally are even stronger? This is the time to say this conduct is unacceptable. Instead, we have accepted it.
Okay, but you say that, and yet other than other countries, Canada's allies saying in various press releases periodically on anniversary dates, hey, this shouldn't be happening, we call for the unconditional release of the two Michaels, that did seem to be the extent of it. So there was the opportunity for the United States under Trump, now under Biden, and other nations to say and do more, and that didn't happen.
Well, I would have been delighted to do more. And I think it was a mistake both for the
Like
United
what?
States and Canada. Pardon me?
Do what? Do what more?
Impose sanctions on China. Put economic pressure on them to release these individuals. China's
Why do you
not
think
reluctant.
that didn't happen under the previous administration?
Because I think that was something that Trump wasn't that interested in. He himself undercut the extradition proceedings by saying that releasing Meng could have been a trade-off to get the big trade deal that he wanted with China. I don't think
that became a weakness in the extradition case. It actually was why some legal observers thought the whole thing might get tossed.
Could you just let me finish my sentence? That's what I said a moment ago. Trump undercut the extradition proceedings, and I'm not saying that his conduct here is what we ought to follow, but the fact is that by acquiescing now in exchanging hostages, we've only encouraged the Chinese to do even worse the next time.
Okay, so you want to talk about the next time, and I think that it's important for us to talk about, as you say, the next 5, 10, 20 years. So we look at China, human rights abuses, dismantling of democracy in Hong Kong, territorial expansion, threatening Taiwan, South China Sea. It is a long, long list, and some of it extends into North America with threatening and harassment of diaspora and the theft of intellectual property. All of these things are going on. What does the Western world need to do in a united fashion now, understanding that China and the Western world have extremely integrated economies?
Well, I think there needs to be a realization that China poses an existential threat to the West as a whole through the rest of this century. And it certainly is the case. It will be more rigorous to deal with China than it was to deal with the Soviet Union during the Cold War. And so we should all ask ourselves whether freedom is going to be worth some additional cost to deal with the Chinese problem. I think we've just actually had an excellent demonstration of a step that could be emulated in other respects with the announcement of the AUKUS project, a strange acronym, but Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, to help Australia build 8 nuclear-powered submarines, hunter-killer submarines that can be used in the Indo-Pacific. I think this is the kind of signal to China that we should seek to do more of. I think we just saw in Washington on Friday the first in-person meeting of the heads of state of the Asian Quad, India, Japan, Australia, and the United States. That's another step. I think there's an awful lot that we need to do, but people need to step up here and say, if you're content to have China do what they did in the case of Meng Wanzhou, if you're content to watch them crush the one country, two systems freedoms guaranteed to Hong Kong in an international agreement, a sacred international agreement that China signed and then dispensed with, if you don't mind social metrics for the government to judge its own population, if you don't like genocide against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang province, if you don't like China increasing its nuclear and ballistic missile capabilities and building the first blue water navy it's had in 600 years, developing one of the most sophisticated cyber warfare programs on the planet, and more and more and more, then maybe it's time to start thinking about responding to it instead of just complaining about it.
You mentioned AUKUS. Canada's not part of that. Should it be?
Well, that, of course, is up to Canada. The leader of the Conservative Party was defeated, although he did say that he would try and join. I think it would be perfectly realistic to extend the concept of AUKUS to Canada, and it's, I would think, possible to join it straight out. But there are lots of things like this. I don't think there's one silver bullet to deal with the Chinese threat. I think we need to take a Burkean approach and find lots of ways of cooperating to demonstrate to China that we don't accept that their hegemony in East and South Asia is guaranteed, nor hegemony broader than that.
You use the word cooperating. Is that an engagement strategy, cooperating with the Chinese, that can be one part of the pillar, in addition to competition?
No, I think it's up to China. They're the ones who are now engaged in what they call, I didn't make up this name, they call it wolf warrior diplomacy. They're the ones that are hacking into U.S. and other country's governmental computer systems and private networks, they're the ones that are increasing the threat here. So they're the ones, I think, whose behavior should change. If they really wanted to behave like a responsible actor in international affairs, they could do it. The fact is they're taking advantage of us, and we're coming really very late to the realization of how serious the threat is.
Ambassador Bolton, thanks very much for your time this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.